You begin with a blank piece of paper on which we have the desire to create the art of architecture and the shelter, the free-flowing, intimate connection to planet Earth with the inhabitants of that shelter, all beginning on a blank piece of paper. It surprises me that there's a possible solution to creating this art of architecture at that beginning.
Well, I remember coming home late at night and seeing the light on in my dad's studio and knowing that something was magical happening in there, and hearing the sound of jazz coming from beneath the door and seeing that light, and sometimes peeking in and not even saying a word.
This home that my father designed, which I thought was normal, my friends, I think almost realized how different it was more than I did. But now that I come back into the house and I revisit it, it's like, oh wow, you know, this is, somebody knew what they were doing.
I think about often that growing up in that space and a home designed by an architect, and not just the details, but the mood of the home and the different qualities of light and feeling that you sometimes can't articulate, and it's magical.
I would like to talk initially about the quality of my life, which involves completely the quality of my wife and her performance, not only as girlfriend and pretty young lady and mother of my children, and through our entire life, which we were in love with each other seriously in every dimension, every definition, of the word love. She was a disciplinarian, a humorist, unbelievable person to be associated with and to be in love with, in my good fortune, for 68 years. We built a house together when we were very, very young, had hardly any money, and I and she until her death about 4 years ago, till she passed away. And you would never know she was sick. She would never allow anyone to realize that she had any problems in life. Somehow she would overcome the opportunity to complain about anything. She loved her 4 boys in every sense of the word, and she referred to them as her 4 boys. She raised them beautifully, and the whole family was just a wonderful family because of that wonderful June, that little Irish girl, June Kelsey.
My mom was tough, but she was also a huge heart. She was, had our backs, and we could trust that if we did something not so great, she would eventually come around and not be too upset.
She created 4 wonderful sons for me who are still caring for me after June left us. And all 4 boys are incredible people, and somehow I honestly believe that they are all just unique, more unique, sensitive human beings because they were raised in a shelter that is sensitively, intimately connected with planet Earth. I would put the children to bed, and that would be about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, and that's when I would go to the drawing board and begin the thought process of the creation of the art of architecture. And I figured I'd work for a couple of hours. And I couldn't stop. It would happen in 3 or 4 times a week. I could not stop. I'd go to 1 o'clock, I'd go to 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd go to 3 o'clock in the morning.
Creating was something that, watching my father, I just thought that's what you did. Having my father's materials around and great pencils, and it even goes further in working with my father. There's so many times that I'm not sure who drew what line. In the fortunate circumstance where Roger became part of the firm, he brought a piece in that I don't have, that ability to be lively and up and always positive and seeing the good of everything.
And I think it's what drew me to the business, because I didn't have that gift, but I had a gift of assembling the parts for those spaces and understanding them. And I started out just trying to get my feet wet, understanding business and what it meant to run a business. It's not business, it's an art form. And we practice that art form.
And then my father, on the other side, is so unaffected by any sort of criticism. He is so sure of what he does and how important it is and how well he contributes to the craft that between those two, it made it easier for me to stay focused and do what I do.
What's also so special is the different people that enter our lives, whether they're the tradesmen and the framers and the cement plaster contractor. These people really care about what they do, and they enjoy, and I think they even celebrate sometimes how we push the envelope with our designs. And that's something that we see, and Todd, my father, witness, and they're on a job site, and maybe weekends they're there with their families and taking them through the buildings that they've been part of the creation of. So there's this legacy component to what we do that is more than just building a house. It's really something more than that, and it's something that I think our clients initially don't sometimes understand if they haven't been through the process, but more and more they become a patron of the arts, and to them it's also more than a building. They're building a community and supporting the lives and the livelihood of many families and individuals. So with that, it's extremely rewarding for me.
And you're going to build a building that you have never built before. It's going to be a prototype, a new building every time you do it. And you begin with this blank piece of paper. You conceive the entire building before you lift a pencil.
Early on, in doing art and getting into that zone is something that once you have, it does become a passion or something that you want again. And I'm sure it happens in sports and music, of course, that totally lost in your work and time doesn't really matter. So many times I've gotten up to finally go to bed and then looked back over at the drawing board and then forgetting that I was supposed to get up, sat back down, and an hour later I'm still there. And it's that great feeling of just being immersed in what you're doing. And I think that happened early on in my sandbox, or my father was kind enough to, we had every kind of blocks, Legos, Tinker Toys, so I always had great things to be creative with. And then when you're in that zone, we were talking about the messiness of the craft. I mean, you literally become, because I still draw, my father still draws, your hands are full of the graphite, or your sleeve is all purple from Prismacolors, and a lot of my clothes are stained that way just from constantly leaning over a drawing board, and you don't care how messy it is because all the lines mean something. So I can remember talking to other people that draft, and we all have that dent in our finger right there from from pressing the pencils for so long. You know, it's permanently in our hands. I know my dad has that, so it's a sign of leaning over a drawing board with pencils for thousands of hours.
I have two sons who join me in the architectural practice who have that same philosophy, and not identical to mine, but uniquely expressed architecturally. The same philosophy is celebrate the nature of man and his intimate involvement with understanding and experience life every minute of every possible day. The pleasure of dawn, the pleasure of dusk, the pleasure of daylight coming in from multiple sources, just being conscious of every element of nature regularly. It's just been a joy to be involved in creating a philosophy of architecture that happens to be typically young architects' philosophy. And I'm thankful that it's passed down to two of my sons who are continuing to marvelously express that same philosophy of shelter for mankind, not styles. It's always for the nature of man at the time it was built. And so we try to build and succeed in building buildings that have no style whatsoever, but they have a deep philosophy of not being confining or restrictive within the building, always sensing daylight from every source imaginable, from overhead, from diagonally or horizontally, and it's an incredible, wonderful, experiential space to be wandering through this house. Thank God that me, my wife, and my family were blessed with each other.